WADR, promoting dialogue.
Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. This is NEWSLINK. Here are the top stories. The Nigerian junta deploys troops on its shared borders with Benin to prevent any possible military intervention by ECOWAS. Mali's Media Regulatory Commission urges professionalism among journalists, especially during conflict situations. A new study by ISS reveals violent extremism and illegal mining activities ravaging the West African coastal countries. And the U.S. Deputy Treasury Secretary Adeyemo calls on Nigeria to stabilize its currency and combat corruption.
Unifying Nigeria's foreign exchange rate will also create the kind of macroeconomic stability that is essential to attracting foreign investment.
Stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is Tawfiq Abdul Nasser with NEWSLINK.
Many thanks for joining us and a warm welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana and Liberia. Let's begin with this development between two neighboring states in the sub-region whose relations are fast deteriorating. Niger and Benin's decades of bilateral and economic failing ties are tumbling following the military coup in Niamey that deposed President Mohamed Bazoum. The latter has been accused of hosting troops from ECOWAS member states and allies for a possible intervention to constitutional rule in the Sahelian nation. Apprehensive, the coup leaders have deployed hundreds of Nigerian soldiers along the nation's frontiers with Benin to prevent any invasion. Imoredet has more in this report.
Sources in the border area known as Gaya, located nearly 300 kilometers away from Niamey, confirmed the deployment. The Nigerian troops are stationed on the border with military hardware and war machines. According to the historical timeline, this is the second of such deployment, with the first in 1963 to 1964. Then the military presence followed a border dispute between Niger and Benin on the island of Leyte in Gaya. But at present, the deployment followed the breakdown of military cooperation between Niamey and Porto Novo after Niger accused Benin of supporting a military intervention that France plans to carry out against the country in collaboration with certain Western countries, a claim Benin denies. Asked about the potential of any escalation, Amado Kamara, a regional security analyst, says,
anything can happen. The risk is non-existent. There could be clashes between two countries because the option of military intervention is always on the table, as said the current president of Bissau Guinea. We can also expect diplomatic relations between the two countries to break down. It is also possible.
Since the military coup of July 26 against President Mohamed Bazoum, a threat of military intervention coordinated by ECOWAS has loomed over Niger.
Imoredet reporting there. Meanwhile, France is from a distance reiterating its position with the junta in Niger on several issues regarding the legitimacy of the government and the expulsion of the French ambassador, among others. Speaking on the sidelines of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Summit in Geneva, the French Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs, Catherine Colonna, said, aggression is the negation and the violation of the most fundamental principle of the UN Charter. Colonna's remark as the UN came days after President Emmanuel Macron said the French ambassador in Niamey, Sylvain Id, was being held in a hostage situation. Take a listen.
ONU, Union africaine, CEDEAO, Europe, États-Unis.
UN, the African Community, ECOWAS, the United States, has condemned this attempted military coup and has demanded that the democratically elected president be restored. So we condemn the coup d'etat. We want a return to institutional order, the free liberation of the president. We back all efforts to reestablish institutional order. That's our position. Our ambassador is doing just fine. He is safe. He's undoubtedly in a very uncomfortable position, and the ambassador is a legitimate ambassador to Niger. He remains in office and will remain in office as long as we decide want him to be. The current military government is not legitimate, and we will make no decisions on demand of an illegal establishment.
Général, les conditions de sécurité, mais ce n'est pas sur une injonction qu'une décision sera prise.
That was the French Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs, Catherine Corona. In Mali, the High Authority for Communication, HAC, now wants journalists to provide verified information during times of conflict. In a press release, the HAC urges the media to maintain a professional approach and respect the profession's code of ethics and conduct. In addition, the body responsible for regulating the media in Mali calls on journalists to work towards social stability and promoting unity in the country. Abdullahi Hassan reports.
In a press release, the High Authority for Communication said it was closely monitoring media coverage of the country's security situation since the attack on the Timbuktu boat, which it described as sordid and inhumane. According to the hack, the terrorists are trying to justify their crimes through an all-out communication campaign of slander, denigration, manipulation, and disinformation on a massive scale. The High Authority for Communication reminds the media and communication agencies of their duty to maintain a professional approach and to respect the codes of ethics and professional conduct of journalists. The body responsible for regulating the media in Mali says it has noted violations of the press code in recent days and calls on the media to be more professional and responsible in the handling of news during these times of conflict. However, the hack commends the efforts of the country's media for their professionalism and urges them above all to work towards promoting social stability and unity.
Abdullahi Hassan filed that report.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. NEWSLINK continues.
Now more on security-related stories. A new study shows the link between violent extremism and illicit activities in the coastal countries of West Africa, particularly in Côte d'Ivoire. These are the findings by the Institute of Security Studies, ISS. The report indicates that parallel to the attacks carried out in northeastern Côte d'Ivoire since 2020, violent extremist groups have infiltrated the livestock and illegal gold mining sectors. This growing pattern and form of insecurity is despite state measures such as the deployment of troops, communal policing, and sensitization of the public against these acts. In the wake of this report, experts recommend that the fight against terrorism must also focus on depriving these groups of the resources they need to operate. We will be joined by William Asanvo, a senior researcher at the ISS Regional Office for West Africa and the Sahel, in the second half of the bulletin for more on this report. In Nigeria, U.S. Deputy Treasury Secretary Wale Adeyemo has called on the state to stabilize its currency and combat corruption to unlock the untapped potential of Africa's most populous country. Adeyemo, who has personal relations to Nigeria as an immigrant to the United States, is currently visiting the country to emphasize the Biden administration's commitment to strengthening economic and trade ties with African nations. From Abuja, WADR's Usman Umar tells us more.
Nigeria, under the leadership of President Bola Tinubu, has recently implemented reforms to revive its struggling economy. Adeyemo's visit is part of a broader initiative by the United States President Joe Biden to strengthen relationships with African countries and provide an alternative to Chinese and Russian investment and trade. As the highest-ranking member of the African diaspora in the Biden administration, Adeyemo has joined other top officials including Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Vice President Kamala Harris in visiting the African continent. During his stay in Nigeria, Adeyemo highlighted the potential for increased foreign direct investment if the country accelerated efforts to stabilize its national currency, the naira.
Unifying Nigeria's foreign exchange rate will also create the kind of macroeconomic stability that is essential to attracting foreign investment.
The U.S. Deputy Treasury Secretary urged the government to revamp fiscal policies by ending fuel subsidies and prioritizing investments in digital infrastructure, education, and creating a supportive environment for small businesses.
Taking simple steps like moving government functions online so Nigerians can apply for business licenses and visas using their smartphones and computers will help improve services, productivity, and reduce opportunities for fees to go into the pockets rather than government coffers.
Furthermore, the U.S. envoy called for steps to strengthen the integrity of Nigeria's banking system and reduce the ability of criminals, terrorists, and other illicit actors to launder money through the country's financial institutions. Adeyemo assured that the United States is ready to assist Tinubu's government in tackling these challenges. For NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
In Liberia, police authorities have arrested and are investigating an American national, Lucas Richards, on allegations of criminal attempt to commit murder and aggravated assault. The American national, who doubles as a missionary, was arrested after he slit the throat of his fiancée, Jessica Lloyd, outside Monrovia. WADR's Darlington Popper has a report.
Dozens of protesters on Monday gathered before the headquarters of the Liberia National Police, calling on state securities to ensure an impartial investigation and the subsequent prosecution of Lucas Richards. The incident is said to have occurred when the suspect Richard drove the victim Jessica Lloyd outside Monrovia, where he attacked and injured her, leaving her with cuts on her neck, the back of her head and fingers.
And we learned that since the Liberian National Police arrested Lucas, they have never charged him and for him to the court. And we know very well our criminal justice system provides for a system where if a person is accused and has been arrested, such person should be brought in due process as fast as possible to be forward to court so that justice will be adhered. The U.S. government will never allow a Liberian or African from Liberia will go there in America and cause some heinous crime. At this time, will not be waiting.
Although the American initially denied attacking his fiancée, the survivor has managed to speak from her hospital bed, informing the public that Lucas used a whip ring to hit her head while using a knife to slit her throat. She was rescued by road users. Police spokesman Moses Carter, speaking via mobile phone, appealed to the public to remain calm, assuring them that the suspect will be processed to court for prosecution.
The investigation is ongoing, and we are hopeful, like we assured the citizens of Liberia, that justice is going to be served. We are going to ensure that the needful is done in line with the rule of law.
While Liberians are calling for justice, the United States Embassy in Liberia made a presentation and said it is closely following the investigation. For NEWSLINK on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Popper in Monrovia.
You are listening to NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM, Dakar. Here is a reminder of our top stories. The Nigerian junta deploys troops on its shared borders with Benin to prevent any possible military intervention by ECOWAS. Mali's Media Regulatory Commission urges professionalism among journalists, especially during conflict situations. A new study by ISS reveals violent extremism and illegal mining activities ravaging the West African coastal countries. And the U.S. Deputy Treasury Secretary Adeyemo calls on Nigeria to stabilize its currency and combat corruption. Still ahead is the press review, guest interview, and sports update. Stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Across the globe, the impact of climate change and conflict have distorted efforts to free of the deadliest infectious diseases, including AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. This is according to the head of the Global Fund Initiative. In a report released on Monday, international initiatives to fight the diseases have largely recovered after being badly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, but the efforts are today threatened. Let's find out more in this report by Oge Obierika.
More than 3 years after the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world, recovery measures to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria are dropping. This is because the increasing challenge of climate change and conflict may cause the world to miss the target of ending the diseases by 2023. In a statement accompanying the report, Global Fund stated that a combination of interconnected and colliding crises, including global warming, have caused malaria to spread to highland parts of Africa that were previously too cold for the mosquito carrying the disease-causing parasite. Extreme weather events like floods are overwhelming health services, displacing communities, causing upsurges in infection, and interrupting treatment in many different places, the report said. On tuberculosis treatment, Peter Sands, the executive director of the Global Fund, said in 2022, 6.7 million people were treated in countries where it operates and 1.4 million more people than in the previous year. The fund also helped put 24.5 million people on antiretroviral therapy for HIV and distributed 220 million mosquito nets. But Sands said there was still hope, in part due to innovative prevention and diagnostic tools.
Ogiobi Erika with that report.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
Darlington Popper in Monrovia joins us now with the major headlines from the Liberian dailies.
For this edition of Press Review, we have the front page Africa newspaper, the Hot Pepper newspaper, and the News newspaper. We will start the review process with the front page Africa newspaper that says, "Who's winning the crowding game?" We see the photographs of President George Weah, his main contender Joseph Yuma Boakai, Alexander Cummings of the CPP, Councillor Tewa Gonglo, Clarence Moiba, and the rest of the presidential candidates on the front page Africa newspaper. Still on the front page Africa newspaper, PYJ threatens war. We see the photograph of dreadful warlord Prince Johnson, now Senator of Nimba County, face-to-face with former Vice President Joseph Yuma Boakai. Tampering with the jurors, we see the photograph here of former Chief Justice Councillor Gloria Musoskau. On the back page of the front page Africa newspaper is all about sports. The Hot Pepper newspaper is our next stop. President Weah to address UN General Assembly tomorrow. Iran prisoner swap, US citizens feed in $16 billion deal. On the back page of the Hot Pepper newspaper is all advertisement and promotion here for President George Weah. Our last stop for this edition of Press Review is the News newspaper. George suspends Solicitor General from Gloria Scout's case. And we see the photograph of George Roosevelt Ziwele on the front page of the News newspaper, along with Councillor Yanati Twain, the Solicitor General of the Republic of Liberia, who reportedly attempted secretly entering the home of the jurors in the case to allegedly tamper with them in a murder case involving the former Chief Justice and 3 other family members. We are targeting silent voters, presidential candidate Clarence Moliba discloses. On the back page of the newspaper, we will not fail you, Bwaka assures Liberians. Protesters storm police headquarters. The headquarters of the Liberia National Police on Capitol Hill was the scene of protests by citizens and sympathizers of Jessica Lloyd, a victim of attempted murder. The protesters had gone at the LNP headquarters to ensure that justice is served in the matter. We will leave it right there. Civil Society Council Laos, U.S. government. Rights groups urges Nimba citizens to promote peaceful elections. On that note, that is how we love to conclude today's edition of Press Review. But before we go, these are the newspapers we actually followed on today's edition. We followed the front page Africa newspaper, the Hot Pepper newspaper, and the newspaper was our last stop. On that note, thank you so much for following Press Review, and bye-bye.
That was Darlington Popper with the Press Review.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
A recent study from the Institute of Security Studies, ISS, highlights a concerning connection between violent extremism and illicit activities in West African coastal nations, particularly Côte d'Ivoire. According to the report, alongside the attacks occurring in northeastern Côte d'Ivoire since 2020, violent extremist groups have established a presence within the livestock and illegal gold mining industries. This worrisome trend persists despite the government's efforts, including deploying troops, implementing community policing, and public awareness campaigns aimed at countering these activities. Let's join William Asanvo, a senior researcher at the ISS Regional Office for West Africa and the Sahel.
The research was conducted from 2020 to 2022, and there were several that took place within that period of time. But concretely speaking, when it comes to the field work, the data collection, it took place from October to November 2021 in Northern Côte d'Ivoire, and also from January to April 2022. So that's the period during which the data was collected.
Can you take us through major findings contained or summarized in your data? For instance, what was the number of people or at least extremist groups operating in this region? And over time, do you have even native people of those communities now involved?
The main group to whom is attributed the insecurity that we witness in Northern Côte d'Ivoire is a set of groups linked to the group for the support of Islam and Muslim, that is an Al-Qaeda affiliate. And those groups have been operating in the border areas between Burkina Faso and Côte d'Ivoire, at least back to 2018. And their presence have fueled insecurity and also have contributed to an evolution in terms of illicit activities in place in that area. But that kind of have been boosted by the presence of the group. So what we've documented is really very much the collaboration that was established between those violent extremist groups and people active in illicit activities and in some of the socioeconomic activities. Particularly talk about illegal gold mining.
Did you also discover how these proceeds from these activities by the extremists are spent?
Yes, actually it's spent to recruit fighters, to recruit people who will provide them with means of subsistence. So basically food stuff and non-food stuff, fuel and all of this. It's also used to get operational means, fuel, as I said, but also motorcycle. It could also be used to to invest also in some economic activity.
What would be your recommendations or suggestions to relevant authorities and stakeholders in the fight right now? Because what we see here is a combined fight against illegal mining as well as curbing violent extremism.
Yeah, I think there is a work that needs to be done on two levels. First of all, in fighting violent extremist groups, and also, more importantly, in trying to cut them from their source of funding. And when it comes to illegal mining, there's definitely a need for the national authorities to find really effective and also sustainable measures to curb that phenomenon. And I think there is a need to, as I said, to increase the part of the activity that is done legally. There's a need to facilitate access to authorization for the artisanal miners. There's a need to find a balance between industrial extraction of gold and the artisanal exploitation of gold.
William Asanvo is a senior researcher at the ISS Regional Office for West Africa and the Sahel. Let's join Sankule Janko with the sports update.
Hello there, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. The Confederation of African Football (CAF) has announced a 130% increase in the prize money for its Super Cup competition. This comes following the approval by the CAF Executive Committee. This means newly crowned CAF Super Cup champions, USMA of Algeria, will now take home $500,000 following their victory against Al Ahly of Egypt during the Friday night fixture in Taif, Saudi Arabia, according to CAF official website. While finalists and runners-up Al Ahly will take home $250,000. Previously, a winner of the CAF Super Cup takes home $200,000. The total prize money for the CAF Super Cup has increased from $325,000 in 2022 to $750,000 this year. CAF has increased prize money across board over the 2 years, including the CAF Champions League, CAF Confederation Cup, CAF Women's Champions League, CAF Africa Cup of Nations, amongst others. And Sao Tome and Principe's women's national team has withdrawn from the 2024 Africa Women's Cup of Nations qualifiers against Nigeria, according to media reports. The withdrawal comes barely a week ahead of their meeting with the Super Falcons later this month. Sao Tome football authorities have reportedly communicated their decision to the Confederation of African Football (CAF). Once the withdrawal is confirmed and approved by CAF, Nigeria will automatically progress to the second round of the qualifiers. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
We have come to the end of this edition of NewsLink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Inyas Bilimu and Mustafa Sek for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at WADL News. We are on Facebook at West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. I am Tawfiq Abdul Nasir. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to NewsLink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newsmi FM 94.0, and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County. For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinions.